when we talk about developmental issues where abuse and neglect, either psychological or even sexual abuse, happens over a period of time, then the responses become a lot more complex as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
What I experience and see is that often there is, as a core emotion, because we need to survive, that core emotion gets repressed, which is often anger. So we hold down our own voice, our own
Hmm.
force, our own
Hmm.
empowerment,
Hmm.
and start to adapt or anticipate to the abuser in
Hmm.
order to avoid further abuse. So we get, as a core emotion, we get anger,
Hmm. Hmm.
suppressed anger, and then we get, perhaps as a coping emotion, we get anxiety, and that often shows up with people in their adult lives, that anxiety, and
Hmm.
which is very prevalent, anxiety, depression in our society. And I would link that back directly to to developmental issues that span a period of time.
Yeah.
And what comes with that is not the fight, flight, or freeze, also to some extent, but at some point the please or the fawn response take over, the
Hmm.
anticipation of danger, and to adapt
Hmm.
to that, the pleasing the other. And that morphs into having anxiety later on in life because your personal boundaries are not intact anymore.
Hmm.
What is me and what is the other? Because you've given yourself out to survive, to respond to the circumstances. So
Hmm.
you see, in this example, it becomes a lot more complex, and
Hmm.
you can even have developmental issues, and then also have a car accident or any kind of mugging or accident related. So,
I would like to ask, in those situations, um, when you maybe were abused as a child by a parent at the age of 7, and that went on until puberty, let's say 13, and the anger that was held is stored, in my experience, at that earliest time when that abuse
mm,
occurred. And it's difficult for that person to let go of the anger because maybe that person and that part of their personality kept them going.
yeah,
And I find it, I sometimes think it's not helpful to emphasize too much the different parts. I'm more interested in looking at the emotional aspects of the personality as serving a function and how they can be brought to work together to reintegrate the person's personality, which has often become very fragmented into
mm,
the ultimate dissociative identity
right,
characterization that we come across.
right. Well, in this example, what I often see is that there's a lot of guilt around anger, that the moment they have been angry, it's met with a lot of resistance or beatings or further abuse.
Mhm, mhm,
So there's no healthy relationship towards anger.
mhm,
And I think a large part of the work is to reestablish that again, that it can be destructive when it's either being suppressed and
mhm,
it acts in on the sense of self, or
mhm,
when it becomes explosive and they attack somebody or verbally or physically. So they kind of waver in between those two extremes, or they just stay stuck on one extreme, the suppression of anger,
mhm, mhm,
kind of renegotiating that relationship towards a healthy anger, which then becomes healthy boundaries,
mhm,
motivation, having a sense of self, being
mhm,
able to distinguish between what is me and what is the other. So those are, I talk about that as a cognitive framework to
mhm,
establish a healthy relationship towards or with anger.
mhm,
And slowly on to express that suppressed anger as to, okay,
mhm,
if your
mhm.
father or your mother or your brother or your sister or whoever it was that contributed to that suppressed anger, could you say in the first person in the present tense, if you don't have to think about the consequences, what would you say to that person? And then I
Mhm,
actively work with that because usually
mhm,
there's a lot of fear or guilt flooding in at the same
mhm,
time.
mhm, mhm. So you're giving them the opportunity to say what they would have liked to have said at the time, but weren't in a
Exactly.
safe space to
Yeah.
do so.
Yeah.
And
And
again, yeah.
not to stimulate any hatred or any kind of blame, but
Yeah.
more to allow them to actually feel the force and the power of anger and to own that again. That's
Yeah.
my objective, just to be clear on that.